Let's discuss this further with Spencer Critchley, a Democratic strategist and American Politics Analyst who joins us live from Monterey in California. Spencer, thanks for being with us. So you would have heard there very loud protests at the scene where Renee Good was shot by an ICE agent. What is your assessment of these protests and how broadly this frustration and anger that we're seeing at the site there of her killing, but also across the United States, is felt? Do you think that most Americans buy the idea that this officer was acting in self-defense and that Renee Good intended to run him down?
I certainly hope they do not buy it, and I'm heartened to see the protests. And I can say this as somebody with quite a lot of experience advising law enforcement agencies and training spokespeople for law enforcement agencies on how to communicate with the public, including how to respond to officer-involved shootings. I've had to handle several officer-involved shootings myself, including very controversial ones. I, on the other hand, though, was working with excellent law enforcement agents and their supervisors who were not only expert at protecting people's safety, but who were deeply committed to protecting their constitutional rights, which would include protecting the constitutional rights of protesters. I always caution people against prejudging cases like this when they see cell phone video. Sometimes you can be surprised by what the investigation will show in the end. However, I will say that the videos we've seen so far are extremely disturbing, and the response of the Trump administration is absolutely the wrong response. It's not just unprofessional and dishonest. It's really undemocratic. This is not at all the way public servants in a democracy are supposed to behave. Those ICE agents and everybody else who's in public employ up to President Trump, ultimately their boss is the people of the United States. It's in the people of the United States that all power is supposed to reside. And they are behaving as if only President Trump is the person who enjoys power, and that cannot be the situation in this country.
Because so far, of course, the administration's firmly doubled down on that line that Renee Good's death was, I think J.D. Vance called it a tragedy of her own making, and of course saying that the officer acted in self-defense. Do you think the administration will be rethinking that position, given what seems to be a growing number, thousands of Americans now protesting ICE's actions?
Not based on their previous record. They've shown that not only do they have no interest in honesty, they're actually actively hostile to honesty. And I say that without exaggeration. This is typical of authoritarian regimes. They can only succeed, especially in the age of mass media, by seizing control of who gets to define the truth. And Trump has explicitly told people not to trust their own eyes and ears, almost directly quoting George Orwell from 1984. J.D. Vance is all too willing to collaborate in that effort. They're stating things that they know are absolutely untrue, but they also know that under an authoritarian regime, the point is to get people to accept things that they do know to be untrue, because the only thing that rules is power. And that's ultimately what this contest comes down to. When you hear Trump and Vance and the others talking about this killing of Renee Good and trying to justify it, they talk about how she was being disorderly and she was disobeying, as if that should be punishable by death. And that's an indication of what we're looking at here. Only power rules. Democracy cannot function that way, and democracy traditionally in the United States absolutely has not functioned that way. There is nothing that we see in those videos that I've seen so far that justifies anything approaching lethal force, even if she were trying to escape. And even if that officer who foolishly positioned himself in front of her vehicle, violating the training that a well-trained officer would have in that situation, while, by the way, filming in one hand with his cell phone and holding his weapon with only one hand in the other, even if she were trying to escape, it's absolutely illegal to kill somebody in the United States just because they're trying to escape from law enforcement. The only excuse for the use of lethal force is when the alternative would be worse, because it's clear that that person is about to murder the officer or murder other people standing nearby or cause them grievous bodily harm. As I say, we can always be surprised by new evidence, but nothing I've seen so far comes close to meeting that standard.
Thanks so much, Spencer Critchley, a Democratic strategist and American Politics Analyst. Appreciate your time.